It's Saturday afternoon, 1979. You're standing just inside the doors of Woolworths, and you've got 20p in your pocket. The floor is that warm parquet that squeaks under your sandals. The air smells of sugar and vinyl and floor polish all at once. And somewhere behind you, your mum is looking at tea towels. You are not looking at tea towels. You are looking at the pick and mix. And here's the question that unlocks this whole story. Why does that memory, that exact, ordinary, nothing happened memory, still make grown adults go quiet? It was just a shop. Britain had thousands of shops, but nobody gets misty-eyed about anywhere else the way they do about Woolies. So today, that's what we're going to work out. Why we loved it. Why we really loved it. And why losing it hurt more than any shop closure had a right to. Let's start at the beginning, because the beginning is stranger than you'd think. Woolworths wasn't British at all. Frank Winfield. Woolworth was an American, a farm boy from upstate New York who'd built an empire on a single idea: pile it high, price it low, and let people touch the goods, which in Victorian retail was practically a scandal. In 1909, he crossed the Atlantic and opened his first British store on Church Street in Liverpool, promising nothing over sixpence. The grand opening was such a sensation that thousands turned up. The crowds had to be managed like a cup final. The British press had sneered at the brash American. The British public voted with their feet, immediately and forever, and how it grew. Through the 20s and 30s, Woolworths was opening stores at a rate that seems made up. At its fastest, a new branch roughly every week or two, sometimes more than 50 in a year. By the time the 70s arrived, there were over 1,000 branches. And here's the crucial thing. They weren't just in the big cities. They were everywhere. Any town big enough to have a proper high street had a Woolies on it, usually in the best spot, usually with the biggest windows. It wasn't a shop you went to. It was a shop that was simply there, like the town hall or the war memorial. You arranged to meet people outside it. You gave directions by it. It was the fixed point the whole high street rotated around. Frank Woolworth's middle name, by the way, Winfield, ended up on the shelves too. Winfield was the store's own brand, stamped on everything from paint to guitars. But you don't love a shop because of its history. You love it because of what it gave you. So let's walk the aisles. First, obviously, the pick and mix, the greatest democratic institution in British retail. A wall of sweets in perspex bins, cola bottles, foam shrimps, white mice, flying saucers, fudge, jazzies with their hundreds and thousands, and a little scoop, and a paper bag, and the dizzying power of choice. You built your bag like an artist. Too many heavy sweets and the scales betrayed you. The weighing was always a small trial. Your bag on the scale, your heart in your mouth, and yes, everybody ate one before it was weighed. Everybody. It was Britain's most widespread victimless crime, and the staff, who had been children too, mostly looked the other way. And the bag itself mattered. White paper, striped, softening at the corners where the fudge sat, carried out into the daylight like a trophy, and rationed, or not rationed at all, on the walk home. Then the record counter. And this is the bit younger people never believe. For a long stretch of the 70s and 80s, Woolworths was one of the biggest sellers of music in the entire country. Not a specialist shop. Woolies. The chart singles rack stood near the front, 7-inch vinyl at pocket money prices, and on a Saturday it was 3 deep in teenagers. Millions of British record collections, proper, serious record collections, began with a single bought in Woolworths with birthday money. And in the early days there'd been the Embassy label, cover versions of the hits, recorded fast and sold cheap, for families who couldn't stretch to the real thing. Music for everyone, at sixpence shop prices. That was the whole philosophy, playing at 45 revolutions per minute. And the toys, Airfix kits and Matchbox cars, and later the full glory of the 80s. Star Wars figures, He-Man, Cindy dolls, all stacked within reach of children, which was either genius or cruelty, depending on whether your mum was in a generous mood. Whole birthdays were planned, standing in that aisle. Whole tantrums were thrown in it too, and every parent in the shop would exchange the same weary, knowing look over your head. Ladybird children's clothes, which dressed half the playgrounds of Britain. Sturdy, sensible, and instantly recognisable to every other mother in the queue. A quiet national uniform nobody ever voted for. School uniform in September. Selection boxes in December. The broken biscuit counter, where a quarter of smashed custard creams cost next to nothing and tasted exactly the same as whole ones. Even the cafe, all steamed up windows and sausage, beans and chips, where the tea came in metal pots that dribbled and nobody ever complained. At Christmas, the whole shop transformed. Tinsel by the mile, selection boxes stacked into towers, the Woolies advert on the telly signalling the official start of the season for the entire nation. For a lot of families, Christmas shopping simply meant one long Saturday in Woolworths, start to finish. Here's the thing you only see now, looking back. Woolworths wasn't organised around a type of product. It was organised around a type of life. It stocked whatever an ordinary British family needed next. A birthday present, a light bulb, a single, a school shirt, a quarter of sweets. It had no snobbery in it whatsoever. Nobody dressed up to go to Woolies. Nobody was intimidated by it. Your nan shopped there, you shopped there, and one day your kids would shop there. That was the deal. That was always the deal. Which is why the ending felt like a betrayal. Because the ending, when it came fast. Through the 90s and 2000s, the ground shifted. Supermarkets sold the CDs and the toys. Cheaper chains sold the basics, and the internet sold everything. Woolworths, by then, was a business that did 100 things while new arrivals did one thing each, ruthlessly. In November 2008, in the teeth of the financial crisis, the company collapsed into administration. And Britain watched, genuinely stunned, as the closing down sale stripped 800-odd stores to the bare shelves. People bought the fixtures. They bought the signs. They photographed themselves in the emptying aisles, in shops where they'd stood as children, not entirely sure why their eyes were stinging over a discounted DVD rack. On the 6th of January 2009, the last Woolworths stores in Britain closed their doors. Around 27,000 people lost their jobs. 99 years on the British High Street. It didn't quite reach its 100th birthday. And do you remember what those final weeks actually looked like? People queued round the block. For a shop they'd been quietly neglecting for years. That's the uncomfortable truth in this story, and it's also the most human thing in it. We loved Woolies the way you love your childhood home. Completely, and from a distance. We'd stopped going, but we needed it to be there, because as long as Woolworths stood on the high street, the Britain we grew up in was still somehow open for business. Then the lights went off, and it wasn't. Walk down any high street today and you can still find the ghost. The building's usually still there, too big for what replaced it, a discount store or a supermarket wearing Woolies bones. Look up above the modern signage and sometimes you can still trace where the red letters sat. Locals never say the new name anyway. They say it's where Woolworths used to be, and everyone over 40 knows exactly where they mean and always will. So no, it was never just a shop. It was the first place you spent your own money. The place the whole family could walk into and every single one of you would find something. It was Saturday, weighed out in a paper bag. Tell me yours in the comments. What did you buy with your pocket money at Woolies? The cola bottles, the single, the Airfix kit? And is the building still standing in your town? Somebody down there remembers your exact Saturday. Go and find them. Nothing over sixpence. Nothing ever quite like it again.